Hello and welcome to Presenting Data to the Public, Politicians, and Stakeholders. My name is Ella Trimbanis. I'm a junior studying government at Harvard College, and I have the honor of introducing our esteemed panelists for this session. Chris Stirewalt is a political editor and anchor of The Hill Sunday at News Nation. He also serves as a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. His most recent book is Broken News: How the Media Rage Machine Divides America and How to Fight Back. Steve Kornacki is a contributor and chief data analyst at NBC. He has provided on-air data analysis for NBC Sports and MSNBC's election night coverage. Additionally, he is the author of The Red and the Blue, the 1990s, and the Birth of Political Tribalism. Richard Coffin is Chief of Research and Advocacy at USA Facts. Prior to joining USA Facts, he conducted research on voting patterns in Chile and worked at Microsoft. He is also an alum of the Harvard Government Program. Anthony Salvanto is the Executive Director of Elections and Surveys at CBS News, where he oversees the CBS News Decision Desk. He is the author of Where Did You Get This Number? A Pollster's Guide to Making Sense of the World. Finally, Harry Enten will be moderating our discussion today. He is CNN's chief data analyst and a former senior political writer at 538. He has provided election coverage for The Guardian and hosted CNN's Margins of Error podcast. Thank you all for joining us.
Let's see. Oh, this mic does work, although I don't really need it. Someone made a terrible error and decided to make me moderator, so clearly there's something in the water up here in Cambridge. Anyway, look, situation's going to be pretty simple. We'll do some nice little chat here, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions, because you guys know much more what you want to talk about than we do. But I'm just going to sort of kick things off right here, gentlemen, and I'm going to just throw it open with a broad question. I wrote 5 questions down on the wonderful Sheridan Commander notepad that they gave us here. And so the first question is, how do you keep your nuance when presenting public data while not losing the audience? And you can feel free to talk about uncertainty as well and sort of communicating that. And gentlemen, you can take it in any order that you wish to, or I can pick on you as well. All right, Anthony, go ahead.
Okay, me and nuance in the same sentence. I don't know. No, let me show you something. I brought some slides, right?
Oh
yeah,
my gosh! Come on.
What a loser.
So wait, they told me how to do this. So I hit computer presentation. Yep. Okay, and then I hit HDMI, and then I hit projector. All right. No. Okay.
Getting off to a great start here.
We need the graphics department.
Yep. So it's, I got to turn this on. Okay. The touchscreen is easier to work. So here we go. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about margins of error earlier, right? So here's your basic poll I pulled from a few years ago. No, it's not a coincidence. I pulled one we got really almost exactly right. But here's how I displayed it and how I would display a poll result all the time if I could and had the time. There's your margin of error in clear terms. Look, for those of us in this room who work in quantitative social science, this is amazing that we can take millions of voters, that we can take a model and get within a prescribed range of what the actual population value is. Now, some might look at that and go, oh, wow, that's really wide, right? Why can't you be more accurate than that? I think, A, that's amazing, but B, to talk about nuance and talk about explaining this to people, what we're showing here is this is a toss-up race. This is a tight race as best we can measure it right now. And again, we can put, a value judgment on that. Is it amazing? Is it not accurate enough for your purposes? That's debatable. But this is one way in which I try to express what it is that we're doing and what it is that we have. So there's my one of them vision. I got more, but we'll do. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the next gentleman sitting next to Anthony. You know, one of the things that I found sort of working in 2024 and sort of trying to broadcast uncertainty is I would take a map, right, a visual, and say, okay, here is if the polls are exactly right, here's what the Electoral College would break down as. And then I'd say, okay, let's say that the error matched what we saw in 2020. What would the map look like then? What happens if we go state by state and the errors match what we saw in 2022? So then there would be a swing to the left. You know, I think obviously your company works a lot with maps, works a lot with that data. Just interested, just as someone who's not in the broadcast sort of space, how you're dealing with all that, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And by the way, to be the 30th person, just to thank everyone for being here today. Really appreciate you being here and to be on this great panel. You know, I work at USA Facts, which for those of you who are not familiar, we spend our time visualizing government data, just data from the government, making it more accessible to the public. And I would say I would take the word nuance and call it context. Right? Like that's the thing that we really tend to focus on. And we spend so much time today talking about different formats. And the trick for us isn't really, do we go on TikTok or, you know, do we make a 30-minute video? It's actually right-sizing the context for the TikTok video or the 30-minute video. I'll give a couple examples. We put out a 10K report for government, which is, it follows the SEC Form 10K, which if anyone wants to fall asleep later today, I highly recommend reading this. It's 200 pages of the driest, most boring thing you'll read, and we are so proud of it. But it's we also put out the exact same information in a bunch of charts and pictures. And this is, I mean this somewhat glibly, this is best received by members of Congress. The pictures are actually really helpful to understanding what government does. And it's very different for each set of things. You just have to figure out how to do it right in each format, right? I mean, what fits in a 200-page book, please don't try to explain the country in a 30-second TikTok video, right? I mean, you can maybe explain the graduation rate, and that's about it. So I think it's all about right-sizing for the format that you're using.
Steve, so interesting point just brought up there that kind of leads me into a second question here. You, for those that don't know, Steve was not always just a guy at the wall. He has, in fact, written a book, which I believe, did you autograph that for me?
I hope so.
I hope so as well. And back when I was an undergraduate, I knew Steve. Steve was working at Salon back then, I do believe. Is that correct? And so you got your start sort of in the written word, and I'm sort of interested sort of in the differences between communicating, you know, on a screen and we're pointing at things right versus communicating via words on a piece of paper, and like, what do you lose? What do you gain? What are the advantages and disadvantages in sort of communicating with the public when you do those two different sort of spaces?
Yeah, I mean, well, to really date myself, I mean, I got my start, it was very novel at the time. It was a state-specific politics website, politicsnj.com. You can guess which state it was. It's my first job, and I remember I ended up doing two things there. My main job was to write for the website covering state politics. The second part was there was a weekend political show on News 12 New Jersey. Which was named after the number of people who viewed it. But and I do remember one of the first things I did in one of the first elections we covered was we did a detailed breakdown on the website, county by county, the 21 counties in New Jersey, sort of like what to look for in each, you know, what the target should be for the Republicans, what the target should be for the Democrats, some demographic stuff, nothing on the level that people are capable of today. So we did that, got great feedback on it, and then I said to the guy who did the show, the weekend show, hey, you know, I'd love to do this on the air. He said, that's great. And I tried to do it on the air, and it was a complete mess, complete disaster, because there were way too many numbers. We didn't have any of the technology we have now. And he kind of told me afterwards, he said, hey, you know, if we do something like that again, keep it simple, and cap it at 2 numbers. And I've kind of kept that in my mind since then, which is sort of, you have the number, and then you have the number to compare it to. And that's the story. The story is the number and the comparison that you're making with the number. And how it kind of, presents itself in my world now is when you think to an election night, a lot of election night I spend going county to county on the map, in any given state. And the one thing I've said we got to make sure for every county in America is you're showing this election result. I want to be able to show right next to it with the tap of a finger what the last election result was. Because if Trump's getting 52% in a county and we're showing that on the air, well, now show me, was it 55% in 2020 or was it 47% in 2020? Because there's your story, there's the significance, and there's the reason we're telling you the county. So that's sort of the early lesson I've learned and how I've tried to apply it.
I'm going to let Chris get in on this in a second, but I will note first off that I watch News 12 when I'm ever at an NJ diner. It's the premiere. I think at least half the viewership comes from New Jersey diners. And if you haven't been to a diner in New Jersey, you're truly missing out. It's a great greasy spoon. And I would also just build on Steve's point and sort of point out that I agree 100%. It's like, the fewer numbers that can tell the story, the better when you're going on air. And then if someone's truly interested in the topic, they can go onto the website, they can go find out more, go get details. But the truth is, when you have a presentation that you're showing on air, most people only remember a number or two anyway. You don't have to show how smart you think you are. Make sure that the audience instead becomes smarter. Chris, take this in any direction that you want to take it in.
Well, I have a graphic also that I want to show about how objectionable it is to wear tube socks with dress pants. I have a whole, it's a multi-point PowerPoint to talk about the objectionability of this behavior. Harry Enten, the world's youngest 85-year-old man.
That right. Where's the diet root beer?
Exactly. I was just able producer Caleb Parker is here with me, and before I walked in this room, we were working on graphics for Sunday's show, and we were talking about how to explain the consequences of a government shutdown politically. And we got in the Wayback Machine. Anyone who has not read The Red and the Blue and hasn't read Steve's book, if you really want to understand why we can't have nice things and why everything sucks so hard, you really need to read this book. It is well written, it's accessible, and it's a really useful history for the starting period. Mark Penn is here. It's his fault. He did it all to us.
Shame.
Yes, he did it all to us. We were going back explaining, okay, so the 95 shut down and then this, and I love the data, right? I'm into it, and we're going through and we're jazzing, we're talking about, oh yeah, and then this, and then, but look at what happened in the Senate, but then da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and doing all this stuff. And then I remembered, oh, I want normal people watching television to learn something from this. If I am just showing, there's a problem in journalism, which is, we believe that the amount of time that we spend on a story bears any relation to viewer interest or newsworthiness of the story. If I do a 6-month deep dive investigative project to come up with the fact that Harvard's coffee service is okay, right? If I do that, it doesn't matter if I came out and like, well, we have the facts. I've said it, and it's one sentence. Coffee service is okay. So we have to remember, we always have to remember who we are serving. And that our objective is not to say that we are very smart and that we know all of these things and look at all the tricks that our graphics can do, look at the whiz bangs and look at all the things that we can do, look at all the stuff that we can do. Our job is to be of service to the public by providing accessible information, and that means fewer numbers, more clearly displayed and explained.
It's beautiful. All right, so I'm going to talk about, or I want to ask a question about a problem that I oftentimes think about, which is the worries. Look, I think we're all, 5 of us, I'd like to think we're all objectionable people. We'll tell it like it is.
You're definitely objectionable.
That's correct. Correct. I'm just thinking about that's something my girlfriend might tell me. Anyway, she digs and digs. I love that woman. Anyway, we live in a hyper-polarized time, okay? Do you think at all about, and how do you control for the fact that the left might think a segment is biased in one direction, the right might think that same segment or that same article or that same graphic is biased in another direction. How do you sort of try and present data to the audience? And remember, it's not just this one article or this one segment, but sort of building out a litany of articles or segments or graphics or what have you. And sort of, does today's modern political environment and the fact that someone from the right or the left could grab something sort of change the way you might think of segments or change the way that you present things to a mass audience?
Oh, go ahead. No, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is the hardest thing today, and it's what we focus most of our time on doing. I think there are a few tricks that we try to use to make it less biased from the get-go. I mean, the first thing that is the hardest is actually just picking the topic, right? The topic to cover. You can pick whatever topic you want, but you have to decide if you're actually just covering stuff that you care about or stuff that the world really cares about. And then once you do that, I think we use a couple tricks like take out the adjectives. We use no adjectives in our work because they can really just be inflammatory depending on who's reading it. We use a lot of charts, right? If people can start with actual images and see things fully in context, like parts of whole, that's actually really helpful. And then really helping people do the math. I think, we are at Harvard. I, spent a lot of time chasing asterisks on correlations while I was here, right? And America hates that, quite frankly. I think people don't like the magic of statistics and what goes on behind the scenes. But if you can show people exact numbers and help them do the math, it's really helpful. We do a poll every couple of years about what people believe as true. And while everything has sort of taken a dive in the past several years, people still believe numbers more than anything. They believe it more than images. They believe it, more than what people tell them, no matter who the person is. I think that's dangerous in certain respects because people can lie with numbers. But the fact is that if you can really start with data, people do tend to believe it more than anything else.
Let me pick up on that. I think it's a really good point. Everybody in this room, I would wager, in some form or another, likes or enjoys the process of doing this exploration. Why are people thinking what they're thinking? What are they doing, right? We can talk to them about it. We can watch their behavior. That process is not just inherently interesting to us, but I think it also leads to transparency and more trust if you walk people through it. I have a graphic. It's somewhat illustrative of what you were just mentioning. If I call a race on election night, how did I get there? Okay, here's a screenshot, and to your earlier point, we try to keep it simple, but we have a chart where it's what does the trailing candidate need of the outstanding vote. I give you my best estimate of how much vote there is left to count, right? And that's an estimate, but it's usually pretty good. And what would the trailing candidate be expected to get based on our models, based on where that outstanding vote is? Well, in this case, Harris needs 61%, and right now we would estimate she's going to get 47% of it. That's a big reason why I called the race for Trump. Now, what I'm doing there is explaining the process to you. So you can, do it's not a black box. It's not how did they figure that out? They're, one way or the other. It's here's what we're looking at. So I'll show you in as simple as I can. And so again, part of what we do here is figure out the process, figure out the study we're going to do. I would posit that is inherently interesting and trust building if you walk people through it.
Does anyone want to pick up on that, or we got nothing? I'll move on.
I just say quickly, I found myself a couple years ago, I did a lot of stuff. Obviously, I was doing a lot of stuff on MS, and, the hosts there tend to come from one side of the aisle. But I would also do other programs outside of that world. So the test I kind of developed for myself about 10 years ago was I would do Hugh Hewitt's radio show often, so a conservative show. And I would sort of say, like, as I'm getting ready to do the show and I'm even saying things on it, I'm thinking to myself, am I saying the same thing? Am I presenting the same information, the same perspective I would if I were talking to Rachel Maddow right now? And if I was on Maddow's show, I would say to myself, am I saying the same thing and presenting it the same way I would if I was on Hugh Hewitt's radio show in the morning? And I sort of got that in my head about 10 years ago, and that became kind of a nice compass for me.
I have what I call the Krauthammer test, would Charles Krauthammer say or do this? And I'm a worse person than Charles Krauthammer was by a pretty substantial margin, but it's good to have in my mind, like, what would an actually good person do in this situation? The difference between news and entertainment is real blurred out, right? It's a real blurry space between people who are sitting and watching my former network Fox or watching MSNBC or watching CNN, who are watching and they want to be angry or they want to be upset or they want to be happy. They've come for a feeling and they've come for connection. And I don't begrudge anybody connection and I don't begrudge anybody get to feel their feelings. But the difference between news and entertainment is that sometimes we have to tell you what you don't want to hear. Right? So sometimes we have to say, like, I know, and I think Steve is a great example of this, of a person where no one has broken more Democratic hearts. Not since Bill Clinton has anybody broken as many Democratic hearts as Steve Kornacki on good Republican nights, going out on TV and saying, it's not happening for you. But they believe him and they listen to him because he is consistent. And the trust that we have to keep with voters and viewers and Harry does an excellent job. I mean, Harry does so much TV, like he's basically, no wonder you didn't have time to buy socks.
This is the first time that I have not worn a suit on a Friday.
Just saying. So the temptation that all of these people resist and that is worth doing is we have to set ourselves separate and apart because it matters on election night and it matters when it matters that we don't go for the cheap clicks and we don't go where the money is every time because we have to save that for something more important.
Yeah, you're objective. There we go. I found the right word.
I'm also objectionable.
That's exactly right. I think Lazarus was the one who lived forever, right?
Yeah.
And I said that he had come back from the dead one time on air, so it was not the first time anything.
New Testament is not your strong suit.
No, I would think not. Shana tava, everyone. Anyway, I would just add to the point, and what I sort of think about is I say, am I going to look back on this segment a month from now, 2 months, 3 months, and be able to defend that segment? Because if I can't, look, I'm going to get things wrong. I mean, if you're out there in the media, you're going to get things wrong. It happens. But the question is whether you believe it's going to be wrong at the time. I think that's the real sort of thing. Someone's calling me. Hold on. No, I am literally talking in front of a conference here at Harvard, so I will call you back. But you want to tell the audience hello?
Hi, Harry. I wanted to hook you up with some data.
He's getting black market data.
I will call you back after this is done, my dear friend. See you. Bye.
This is what builds trust.
That is what builds trust. Trust with the audience. Noam, if you don't know, Noam Jorman is actually the owner and operator of the Comedy Cellar. Steve knows him well from the city. Anyway, so this is another sort of thing that I kind of wonder about a little bit, which I think you kind of hit on a little bit, Chris, which is, are there things that you find important that the audience doesn't give a hoot about, and vice versa, whereby the audience really cares about something, but you don't give a hoot about it? And then how do you balance those two things going back and forth?
Be David Bowie, don't be Mick Jagger. The Rolling Stones, are they still touring? Yes. The Rolling Stones are now the world's greatest Rolling Stones cover band, right? They do it, they play, you're like, it's almost like the Rolling Stones. It's amazing. And they've been frozen in amber for all of this time. And there they are. It's almost lifelike. David Bowie, on the other hand, every time David Bowie had #1 hits in every decade that he was doing, and he went through 7 or 8 permutations of who he was. And every time he had one, and they're like, oh, we like the Ziggy Stardust stuff. This is great. And it's like, well, I think I'm going to go through like a Marlene Dietrich Berlin cabaret phase. And the record label was like, why don't you just do more of the crap that people are buying millions of records for? And he didn't. And he did his own thing. And I think David Bowie is a much more interesting artist and lived a much more interesting life than Mick Jagger's was. No offense to Jerry Hall or whatever. But I always feel like if I'm playing the hits too much and I'm giving the people what they want all the time, I'm doing it wrong, right? If everybody's too happy, I know that as a journalist, my job is to be a skunk at the garden party and to tell people what they don't want to hear from time to time. And if what I'm doing, if people are like, just keep it coming, that tells me, that's my warning signal, like, it's time to disappoint the home team, right? Now is time to make sure that these people don't like me too much.
Anyone want to add, or we can jump right into audience questions as well, unless someone have a very strong point they want to make on this. And I have other questions as well in case the audience fails, but this seems like an intelligent audience. Otherwise, we're going to have the professors come up and we're going to have a lecture instead if you don't ask enough questions. So do we have mics, or are they just going to yell out those questions? I don't know how this works.
Yell out.
Yell out is the answer. All right. Who's got some questions?
So I want to know, Chris, you brought up a really good point. And that is, when you tell it like it isn't, or what I don't want to hear.
Right.
You break, or some people would say you break community.
Right.
How important is community in journalism? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think for us, and we're not really journalistic, so in one respect, I have no idea what I'm talking about when I answer this question. But we do believe that you actually have to give people what they're looking for up front, right? I mean, if you're going to start with something that is just so boring, and if you go to our site, you will see we have a lot of great articles and a bunch of really boring shit, right? And we really have to make sure that we're actually giving people a little bit of what they want, and that means understanding what various communities really actually care about, right? You have to give people their local data. You have to start wherever they are. You have to start with something that's relevant to them, or something they care about, or something that's relevant to the world they're living in. If you don't, there's just no hook to actually bring them into learning the bigger context or the bigger picture of the stuff we're trying to teach people.
Some of it, if I could, comes back to, I think, a fundamental trouble with the fixation on the horse race. And we talked a lot about that. There was a lot about that earlier this morning, okay? The horse race is what it is, but you want to give voice to people on other side of it. So one of the things I try to do is, I'm going to show you a graphic of all the ways that, say, Democrats answered this question and all their top answers or views. And then I'm going to show you a graphic on all the way Republicans answered that question and all of their views, and explain the why. Because ultimately, when somebody's watching, I hope, me or Steve or whomever, Harry, what they're looking for is an insight into why is this happening out there in the public? And the way to get there is to give voice to, when I say, both sides or all sides of how they arrived at the issue. Polling does that very well. For all the consternation in the back and forth over 1 point, 2 point that we've talked about, polling does that and gives that voice very well. So if you give those perspectives and not just the percentage or the overall percentage, and all my colleagues here do that exceptionally well, then I think you start to address that issue.
Yeah, I think it's built on a lot of what's been said here, but what struck me when I think about it over the last generation, really over the course of my career, I would say, is the level of engagement from the audience, just the interest in politics. I always tell people is like growing up in the 1990s and like being interested in politics. Show up at school and say, "How was that Dole Clinton debate last night?"
Woo!
Nobody wanted to talk to me. And my experience in the last 10 years is that, if I'm in some kind of social setting where I'm conditioned just to sort of think, I'm the politics guy, nobody's going to want, they all want to come over and talk about it. And everybody's not just into it, they've chosen sides. And so I feel fortunate in what I do. I think there's, to me, I think folks up here are in a similar place. It's sort of on an island. It's a very unique place right now because more people than ever into politics. They're on a side, they're on a team, and the only common ground that they have really is they all want to know who is winning, who's losing, and they want to know the why of it. They want to understand it. And so I've been able to have, I feel like I said a minute ago, I can talk to Maddow, I can talk to Hugh Hewitt, I can say the same things. I feel I've been able to have conversations with people, and this is not just in real life, but this is on the air. I feel like that's sort of the conversation I'm having, an attempt to sort of get out of that sort of that divide, that sort of tribal divide that we have. And I do think that there's that, like, trying to understand the why of it is sort of a unifying thing.
But I would add that sort of, and I think, Steve, you're a great example of this. You can build your own community. I mean, Steve built a community in terms of, the Kornacki cam, right? People would literally go on to YouTube.com. I looked at this one time, and they were like...
They didn't tell me about that, but yeah.
They didn't tell you, but it was massively successful, right? And you can... yes, there is that audience that is out there that is the current audience, and while you don't want to diss that audience, you can recognize that if you have something that's unique, have something that's different, you can go out there and build a different type of community, and a community that is respected throughout the different partisan waves that currently sort of are in our country. So, what else? We got a fine person up there.
So I've really appreciated the sort of conversation about...
Oh, we got a mic.
This. So I've really appreciated the conversation about, like, how do you appeal to the average person? How do you pull people in? How do you communicate these things? But I'll speak for all the weirdos in the room. What are the things, if there is one thing that you sneak in for all the weirdos who are watching? What are the bones that you're sort of throwing us? So, you hook me to watch, your program or to read your information or something, for us, right? Thanks.
I mean, don't insult their intelligence, I would say, is a good way. So don't talk down to anybody because there's nobody there. Being simple doesn't mean being obtuse or facile, right? There's a lot of facileness that happens in this reporting where people are stealing bases. They're pretending to know things that they don't know, or they're pretending to not know things that they do know, because it plays better, right? And we're all the ones looking at the bottom of the graphic, and we're like, wait a minute, that's 3 polls mashed together. That's not one poll. So I think if you're a junkie, you're not, broadcast TV is not where you're at, right? You're not like, the best thing that we can do is not insult your intelligence, in a perfect world, this stuff is like the weather. It's not the mainstay, but they come to us, the wacky weather guy, every once in a while, and they're like, what's going on with the 5-day forecast? And we say, well, it could do this and it could do that, and then back to the news, right? That's what it's supposed to be like. And as Steve points out rightly, it has become obsessive to a point where it's destructive, right? So we have reached a destructive point of obsession in the results of something that we do that we know relatively, I mean, we know a lot more than we did in the 1990s, but we also have had to acknowledge that we know a lot less than we once thought we did. And I think the best thing we can do for super nerds is to not insult their intelligence by being shady.
I think that's right, and I would just add 2 things to that. One is it sort of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. There's the articles that you can write, which tend to probably go to that audience, that nerdy audience, that whole, and I know that audience well. My goodness gracious, back from the 538 days. That was a nerdy audience. Loved them each and every minute of it. But more than that, what I would argue is if you can create an original point, I almost have like 2 different types of segments I put on air, right? There's here is the data that a lot of people have seen out on the web, but I'm going to bring it to a mainstream audience. You have that type of segment. And then you have the type of segment where it's, okay, Jimmy Kimmel has his premiere, not premiere, but the premiere from the suspension, I guess, coming back on Tuesday night. I'm hitting the air Wednesday morning, and I want to have some numerical way to show folks that a lot of people watch that. And I know that the ratings are not going to come out until 6 p.m. or so for the broadcast news. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to YouTube and see how many people watch that YouTube video. Then I'm going to go back, scrape data from the last 6 months. What was the median viewership over those 6 months? Put those 2 numbers together. And now I've created an original data point that nobody else actually had. And that's the way that I would hook in that nerd audience, per se, is actually tell them something they don't know. That's, I think, how you reach out to every audience and make yourself entertaining.
There's also there's political science concepts that run through all of what we do, right? So like as we head towards the midterms, people are going to be talking about, the nature of the times, how's the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And we may not say it exactly that way, but it's going to be in there. And we're going to have people who say, well, their own pocketbook is, suffering because of inflation or this or that. And it's in there, so you can kind of read into our approach, our questionnaire designs, our presentations, where you get political science concepts that are in there, even if they're, sort of a layer deep.
And I would just add that one difference we see on our site between these two groups, right, is the people who really want the surface level stuff will show up to an article and then bounce, right? But the people who don't will actually spend some time exploring. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how can you even jump from a video to exploring other content? How can you read an article and explore further? I think AI is actually giving us a lot of really cool techniques to do this further now, where people can actually interact with this information and have conversations with it. And so I think giving people the option to explore is really a huge thing too.
We got a ton. Let's go there, and then we can bounce our way back.
So my question is about whether or not you as a panel think that there exists a crisis of trust when it comes to data, either something as local as you and I are having a conversation, I have one data point, you have another, and all of a sudden there's no common ground with which we can engage in civic discourse, or even something more national and broad like what happened with Donald Trump and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So do you believe that crisis of trust in data exists? And if so, this is the hard part, how do we address it?
That'll be you.
Let me pull out my 4-point plan here. No. Well, I'll tell you one area that this is specific really to what I do on election nights, and it bothers me. And it's not one where I think the problem is with us, and I think the problem is with election administration, and that is we make it needlessly. This is an admission against interest here. I mean, this is what keeps me employed, I think. But I think we make election reporting, results reporting, needlessly complicated and confusing. And there's a way to do this very efficiently and very transparently. And the answer is the state of Florida, which is, it's ironic because the biggest election night vote reporting disaster of modern times was in 2000 in Florida. I don't need to go through it here with folks, but Florida actually did something in response to that. They fixed it. They changed it. And so in Florida, within 30 minutes of poll closing time, every county of that state must report out all of the mail-in vote that had been cast. It's going to be substantial. All of the in-person early vote that's been cast. They must report out the results of that within 30 minutes of poll close. Now, it's going to be about 70% of the vote, 60 to 70% of the vote in any given county. So all of Florida, except the Panhandle, closes at 7 o'clock Eastern. And so by 7:30 Eastern, we've got 2/3 of the vote from just about all the state. And then within about 90 minutes, all of the other counties are going to be filled in, and then the Panhandle, is going to come in after that. Florida is a massive state with heavy early voting, and they're able to do that. States like Arizona, states like Nevada, these are consequential states in the Electoral College that if, we wait days on, there was a scenario last year, I know everybody remembers 24 now, it was quick, we knew it was Trump early in the night. If it had come down to Nevada and Arizona, which it certainly could have, it would have been 2020 all over again. Completely needless. And being on the air and trying to explain to people, okay, well, what you're looking at right now is the same day vote. We think this is most of the same day vote. We're not sure. Now, any minute, a small bucket of mail-in votes are going to be reported out. But keep in mind, these are the mail ballots that were received by last Thursday. So wait till you get to the ones that... This is what in 2020, I spent 5 days trying to explain this as Arizona, came in and that margin, for Biden slowly dwindled. Spent 5 days in Pennsylvania trying to explain, it's another small batch, 2,200 vote by mail have just come in. And it should not be, there are folks, and I'm sure there are plenty in this room who understand that process detail by detail, who can go through it. And that burden should never be on the average American. That burden should never be on the average voter to understand the differences between the mail-in votes that were received Thursday and the in-person votes that came today. You should just be able to give them results. And I hear a lot of I hear a lot of, I'll just say, a lot of excuse making around this. We deal with election administrators. I call them, I spend 2 months before the election calling election administrators around the country. I find some folks who are super into this, super eager to help, and I find some folks who are really just kind of functionaries who love telling you no and why things can't be done. And I think that attitude, I think that approach has.
I cannot agree. I cannot emphasize enough how right and true this is and how dangerous it is that we have this preposterous system. Pennsylvania, give me a break. Come on, Pennsylvania. But let me just ask you this question, and I think it's a material question. What is the likelihood that we are going to get through the midterm election with a peaceful, straightforward, uncontested result, that we have just a normal amount of legal filing and whatever? It feels very low to me right now that we are going to, a year and 2 months from now, say, well, we had another regular old midterm election and we got out on the other side. I know that because we have the team at DDHQ at News Nation, we'll call it first again. We'll be there. It's fine. We'll win. We'll beat everybody. But how long will it take to tell the American people who has control of Congress? Will there be violence? Will the Justice Department intervene? Will Pam Bondi show up someplace and say, we're actually seizing these ballots and we're not going to count them? If you start spooling out all the insane things that could be happening in November of 2026, it makes a person nervous. We have a responsibility in what we do to be clear, concise, accurate, and do all of that. But we can only do as much as we all spent a week in 2020 saying, but Trump's not going to win Pennsylvania. That's basically what we had to say in between breaths all throughout that week in 2020. If he didn't win those states, he's definitely not going to win this state that is substantially more Democratic. But we couldn't just say that, right? We had to wait and wait and wait. And in the time that passed between Election Day and Saturday morning, it got real stressful in this country. And we can all pledge to do our parts, but we need the people in these state elections offices to pick up the other side of this. And they need to count the votes and they need to be done. And the states that obstruct, like Pennsylvania did, voting early, counting early ballots, are making a mistake and they're playing with fire.
Well, you mentioned specifically government data too, and I should caveat this with, given that we only use government data, any impassioned defense of it is just me defending my job for the future. But when I think about the current system of data from the BLS, for example, right, I think the direction of it, especially in this administration, is actually very bifurcated, right? There are a bunch of things that are being done that hurt trust, like, yes, firing the BLS commissioner right after a bad jobs report can hurt trust. But also, on the other side, it's somewhat a miracle to us that government data is as trusted as it is, because it's so out of date in the way it's collected and the way it's presented and all that kind of stuff. It is deeply in need of modernization, so I think it can go both directions, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that right now.
Let me show you a quick graphic.
Yeah, buddy, that's what I'm talking about.
That speaks to some of the points, and Steve raised this too, right? Sometimes you will see a map, it's a county map, and somebody will go, well, look at all that red. How's So what we do is we just turn the map on its side and show you, well, this is where the votes are coming from, right? This is just another dimension, it's how many votes. So it's a step toward using data, maybe showing a little bit more as a way of transparency, but also of educating and saying, this is why the data is pointing the way it is, because the other way could very easily be, misunderstood or misinterpreted if you don't have a Steve or a me or a Harry standing there and explaining it to you, and that's a way.
Caleb, we should steal that graphic. That's a really good graphic.
Do we have time for one more? Or we got time for one more.
Is the copyright on there?
Sorry, people over here. I never made that turn. So
he can't go to his left.
I can't go to my left.
He can't go to his left.
Wide right, yet again. It's a Bills joke. I'm a Bills fan.
So our organization does a lot of research around news junkies, which are roughly 27% of the country. And interestingly enough, 11% are just news junkies, meaning they're not entertainment junkies, they're not sports junkies, they are pure news junkies. for me, there's a dichotomy in this panel in the sense that USA Facts makes the data available to anyone to go deep with, but they obviously don't have the megaphone that your organizations have. Your organizations have the megaphone and obviously the great storytelling online, but my team, when I was at Microsoft, built the CNN Magic Wall from the haptic feedback. And the biggest, most interesting point of research when we conducted research around it is that people actually wanted to play with it on their own as they were watching the talent on air, but also going forward. And it strikes me that a decade later, and we gave the technology to CNN, and then the other news organizations started developing their own. It still doesn't exist, right? So my question for you is, how do we bridge between making the great data and the great toolkits that you have available on air available to people so that they can go deep on their own, and in this way you can mobilize that 27% of the country that will actually go and do the fact checking, go and learn to educate the other part of the country about really what the dynamic is and what's going on. Because for better or for worse, TV works in sound bites, right? People see you all for a few minutes, but then you have to, move on to something else. And continuing that is an important element. It's just you don't see it as readily from any of the major organizations. So I'd love to understand how you're bridging that gap between the big screen and the little screens.
Do you feel like you want to say something? Because you can jump in or I can jump first, whichever way you want to do it.
I think there's a lot of stuff, actually. What do you use?
I would say that I believe that the 2024 election was the first time that CNN had its app, and you could use the Magic Wall in its app, a version of it. And I know this because the former head of CNN, a guy by the name of Jeff Zucker, introduced me to two older Jewish men. I have a whole cadre of older Jewish men, including Noam, who called us earlier
about
today.
To call.
And Lowell would tell me, oh my God, I'm following along in the Magic Wall app and I'm creating my road to 270 votes and so on and so forth. So I do think that bridge is sort of being, built little by little by little. I would also say, I didn't hear this, there's going to be some percentage of the population that we can't reach. That is going to be the case. I hate to say it, but there's going to be some percentage that we can't reach. And then the other note that I would just say is that this is the sort of give and take, right? Which is, if I have to prep a segment for the 8 a.m. hour and then a totally different segment for the 9 a.m. hour, and as soon as that 9 a.m. segment is over, I'm thinking about prepping the 7 p.m. segment, well, it's going to be awfully difficult to then put forth all the data and then line it up online. But I think for the bigger projects that we do, I think that is something that has actually been doing more and more in the media, where we have been releasing those crosstabs. I think it's so important that any news organization actually, for instance, just releases the crosstabs of their data. I think that that's something we can all strive for, even if they can't release the raw data. Chris?
And Scott Traynor could tell you how many people went to the DDHQ website and played with maps and played with stuff. Scott, I don't know how huge. I know, not enough. It's always more with you. It's always more with you. But I think for the news junkies, I think we're in a very engaged time. I am sure that you guys all online, I think it's very engaged. Is that your experience also?
That statistic, excuse me, I didn't know. That's, but it meshes with it. I would just say I was one of those people watching the first CNN Magic Wall saying, I want to use it. So thanks.
Look what you gave America right here.
It was hardwired, George Brown, I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
Basically put different data on the back of the...
No kidding.
Yeah.
I found...
a long way for sure.
I found... I was trying to figure out for this book, The Red and the Blue. Sorry, it's not a plug for the book, but...
but you should read the book. It's very good.
It was like the concept kind of started in 2000, and I tried to find the first reference of it. So it brought me back. I found at NBC, in one of the studios, they had what they used in the 2000 election for the board. And it was literally, each state was a physical tile dangling on the thing, and it's a red on one side and blue on the other side. So 2000 doesn't seem that long ago, but that's what we were doing.
I think that we're at time. Are we at time? We are at time, and I remember that wall. Oh my God, that was the best thing. And you watch at 3:15 in the morning when all of a sudden Tom Brokaw literally stops talking. He's getting something in his ear, and it's literally Zucker, I think, talking to him, telling him what the Florida Secretary of State's website had, and that it was down to like 535 votes was the lead. It's incredible TV.
This is why he is the way he is. That's what broke him.
You can find it on YouTube. It's absolutely, if you're not in a watch, if you love elections and haven't gone back and watched old election night tapes, those are the best. Anyway, I would like to thank our 4 panelists and thank you, tremendous audience, for giving us your attention.